Verrückte Salt. I didn't think I was going to survive stories. When I was 2, almost 3, my parents were at a wedding, and my cousin, 15, was babysitting us. I have no idea if my parents had approved or anything, but we were jumping from the inside windowsill onto a mattress on my bedroom floor. We were living in a 2-story house. The windows were open. Little OP, in her infinite wisdom, took a step back too far, and because I was small enough, I could fit fully through the window. I fell the 2 stories and landed head first on concrete. My cousin asked my siblings where I had gone, and my sister, who was 4, replied that I had fallen out the window. My cousin, of course, didn't believe her, but after some coaxing, looked out the window to see me unconscious on the ground. Surprisingly, I didn't suffer from any real injuries. I had a concussion from the fall, and apparently when I landed directly onto my left eye. So, I had a badass black eye. The only lasting effect from the fall is now the fact that my skull is crooked, and so my eyes aren't level. Not that noticeable in day-to-day life, but incredibly visible if you look at me in the mirror. About 10 years ago, there was a storm and flood on our French campground. The tent was flooding, unsalvageable, late at night. I was maybe 9. The car was parked in front. Mom wanted to quit trying to save the tent and shelter in the car. Dad wanted to keep going, trying to save small bits of our stuff floating around. Mom had had enough after a few minutes longer in the freezing water and said,
"No, I'm gonna go sit in the car with OP."
Mom and I zipped open the tent, exited, took 1 step towards the car parked maybe 5 steps away. Then, a massive tree fell over the entire length of the car and crushed it to scrap. Glass flew everywhere. Had my dad not protested and given in to Mom sooner, she and I could have been in the car and could have died. A minute sooner, and we would have been smashed to a mixture of metal and body parts. A car once hit me when I was a child. The hit was in the middle of my forehead, and the driver ran away. I stood up and started walking home without realizing what just happened. Halfway there, I felt a warm liquid coming down from my forehead. I touched it and looked at my hand and said,
"Oh, blood,"
and started crying. Somehow one of my neighbors found me and carried me home. I was laying in bed for some hours. I probably passed out since I don't remember this part, until my father came back from work and took me to the hospital. To this day, nobody knows why nobody called for an ambulance. But anyway, I'm alive and functioning for now, with a star on my forehead to remind me of that accident. So yeah, I survived, I guess. My friend's mom tried to beat a train in a Ford Explorer. The train slammed into the front left of the SUV, and we went spiraling off into a ditch. All I could smell was gasoline, and I knew our time was short. I opened the center console, grabbed the seatbelt cutter, and cut us all free. I used the blunt end of the cutter to break the glass, no percussion point, and crawled out, followed by everyone else. Since the engine block took most of the damage, we were all pretty much fine. Turns out the reason I smelled gas is because a big-ass rock punctured the gas tank. So yeah, came pretty close to dying and never rode with her mom driving ever again. Could have been much, much worse. In December 1979, Cincinnati, Ohio, the Who concert. Myself and my friends were in the front waiting for the doors to open. In the background, you could hear music playing. The crowd behind us started to rush to the door. I was literally picked up off my feet. I'm in the air about 3 feet off the ground, wedged between 2 bigger guys, when my left leg got caught in the handrails, spreading me apart. I yelled once the pain became too much, and a guy behind me lifted my leg over, freeing me. Once inside the arena, we settled down and smoked a joint. Then, when I went to relieve myself, is when I saw the bodies covered up in sheets. Very thankful I was in front and not in the middle. That concert is the reason we now have reserved seating versus festival seating. The Pistons seized on my motorbike, traveling up the M6 in the UK. I remember flying over the handlebars, hitting the road, and looking backwards at 3 lanes of traffic coming towards me. I was lucky. A couple of broken bones, and the tire imprint of a Volkswagen Beetle from hip to shoulder. Still gives me panic attacks. When I was 7, I visited my grandparents. They had a dog this time, and I petted him before I wanted to go to bed. He has always been a bit aggressive, and so it came that he suddenly jumped on me and bit my arm very hard. He barely let go of it. I didn't feel anything at this point, probably from shock. That's why I thought everything was fine. I didn't see the wound because I was wearing a thick pullover and wanted to go to bed. But my mom heard the sound of his growling and came up to me to ask if everything was fine. I just pointed to my arm, and she pulled me with her to go check. Turned out, my arm was almost ripped off, and I could have bled out if I had just went to bed like I wanted to. So, thank you, Mom, for noticing. Not mine, but I don't think the dunderhead ever realized how close to death she came, so I will tell her story. We were on the home stretch of the Inca Trail, heading toward the Sun Gate at Machu Picchu. The trail is maybe 3 to 5 feet wide for most of this stretch, mountainside to the left, and sheer drop of hundreds of feet to the right. We had an injured hiker in our group, so we were pushed up against the mountainside, letting other groups pass. I'm near the front with our group leader, and we are in a line of about 16 people stretched along the mountain. The next part happened very quickly. The last group to pass us comes along. Among them is a young woman, 20s or 30s, carrying an open umbrella. Oh yeah, it was raining, meaning the trail was slippery. She's waving it around, and it gets tangled in a low-hanging tree. The impact dislodges a branch, which drops behind her with a considerable thud. She spins around and puts her hand to her mouth, giggling, umbrella in the other hand, and says,
Did I do that?
As she spun, her foot went off the trail. She wobbled for a split second, and then somehow swung her leg back on the trail. 5 or so people from our group saw it happen. We were immediately screaming various things. The first words out of my mouth were,
Close your fucking umbrella!
Though the umbrella might have been what let her keep her balance. and pulled her back onto the trail. Her expression never changed. She didn't seem to notice, and she kept on walking, umbrella open. When I was 6, my mom, brother, neighbor, and her son all took a trip to the beach. On our way back, we were driving on the highway at about 75 miles per hour. I was in the car with my neighbor and her son. My mom was in the car behind her with my brother and his friend. Side note, my mom and my neighbor were having an affair. My mom had filed for divorce 6 months prior to this event. My neighbor turns around to ask us what kind of ice cream we wanted at the next stop. 2 16-year-olds were driving drunk on the opposite side of the highway. They came flying across the median and hit our car head on, going over 100 miles per hour. Our SUV flipped over and over and over again. It was a crunched up mess by the time it came to a stop. My mom watched the whole thing. Both of the boys who hit us were killed on impact. My neighbor died. My neighbor's son had a fractured skull, broken ribs, broken arms, both broken legs. He had to use a wheelchair and had pins in his legs for over a year. Apparently, my mom pulled over and pulled me out of the car. I was knocked out and had blood all over me. She thought I was dead. Then I woke up and started crying hysterically. I was fine. I wore my seatbelt because I wanted them to think I was responsible. Since I was so small and wore my seatbelt, all that happened to me was a fracture in my skull by my eye. On August 4th, 20 years had passed since the crash. My mom texted me and said that today marks 20 years since I was given back to her. When I was 7, my parents started dating this guy. He was a textbook abuser, to put it short. To cut to the chase, one night in 2012, he got drunk as fuck and got a knife. He started screaming and stuff, saying stuff about how he's gonna kill my parent and I, how he's gonna leave me with her corpse and stuff. The neighbors heard and somehow managed to get in and keep him locked in the living room. He stabbed the door numerous times. Anyway, we managed to get out and stayed at my parents' friend's house while the police were called. That's pretty much the only thing I remember, aside from the fact that that day was also the first time I had experienced a panic attack. It feels weird. If the neighbor hadn't heard him, or hadn't managed to keep him locked in there, I'd have been dead. You've stayed a while and listened. Here's a side quest. Head to the comments and tell me what year you were born, and be on the lookout, as I may just personally thank you in a future video. I'd like to personally thank Short Stack 7 Ounces for completing a side quest and supporting this channel. Please continue to enjoy these stories of unexpected survival. I fell 45 feet from a stage ladder when I was in the 8th grade. I was on the stage crew, and it was the first time we climbed the ladder to the 60-foot high catwalks above the stage. I was the first to climb down, and instead of closing my hands on each rung on the way down, I shifted my hands to the upright rails on the side. I guess my hands slipped off the rails, and the next thing I knew, I was falling. I had enough time to look down, then to look back up when I hit. Luckily, I first hit a big sheet metal air duct that was about 12 feet off the concrete floor. I I crushed the air duct, but I guess it was like a big collapsing cushion for me. Then I fell from that and landed on the angle iron curtain weight rack. Bent that too. Ended up with broken ribs, collapsed lung, very painful, broken arm, and broken nose. The first thing I did when I caught my breath was to wiggle my toes. They still worked, and I figured I was going to be okay. Paramedics arrived quickly, and they scared me the most. They said I was going into shock, assumed some serious injuries, and got me to the hospital fast. I spent 3 to 4 days in the hospital to make sure I didn't have internal injuries, then a week at home. I was really sore all over for a while, but no long-term problems at all, and was back at school the next week. They called me the skydiver. That was decades ago. I'm still thankful every day for surviving that fall, and I feel very lucky for not breaking my back or worse. I don't take any sunrise for granted. The worst day is still a gift when you thought you were going to die. That's actually the best part of the whole deal. I just appreciate little things. And whenever I get irritated or down about something, I think about how blessed and lucky I am. Life can suck, but it can also be really cool, often at the same time. Back in 2012, I was driving my friend and I to go get some food. We were sitting at a stoplight, first car, and I can remember looking out the side window, then hearing my friend scream. I turned back just in time to see a semi-wrecker hit us head on. Turns out the guy wasn't paying attention at the opposite end of the intersection, which stopped at the bottom of a hill, so he was going a decent speed. There were no brake marks either. His semi pushed my car back into 3 other cars and a moped before landing on top of my car, one wheel going through the ceiling down the middle console, so barely missing mine and my friends' heads. Most of the other people involved walked away with minor enough injuries. My friend had some stitches and a lot of bruising. The man on the moped had toes amputated and had to be taken to the hospital for internal injuries. I was taken to a hospital for broken ribs, collapsed lung, and a brachial plexus on my arm. Nerve function was not working, so I couldn't use my arm/shoulder fully for almost a year. Still hate semis. I grew up in rural Iowa. One night, I was driving into town on the gravel roads, and a deer ran out in front of me. I did exactly what I shouldn't have done, swerved to avoid it. I lost control of the car, went down in the ditch, and basically drove up a tree. The car ended up upside down, and the driver's side window and windshield shattered. As the car was swaying back and forth, my head tilted out of the window slightly. The weight of the car caused the right side of my head to press up against the broken glass around what was left of the window, severing half my ear. I managed to find my phone, dialed 911, ended up in the hospital, and picked glass out of my scalp for a few days. If you like listening to stories read by an actual person, look no further. That's right, I will never utilize an AI voice to tell these stories. Please support this channel by hitting like and subscribing. Yours truly, Verrückte Salt.